Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back on the podcast. And this time, the podcast we have Siddharth Shah. Welcome to the podcast, Siddharth.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, so we have this cliche thing that we do on every episode where we ask the guest to introduce himself because I'm typically bad at introductions. So, who is Siddharth Shah? What does he do?
So, Siddharth is an early stage investor at Malpani Ventures, which is a family office of Dr. Malpani.
Mm-hmm.
I fund early stage companies at pre seed or seed stage. Um, Typically, companies raising up to 5 crore rupees in the first check or the first institutional investment, other than friends and family, is where we come in. And areas of interest are B2B software, enterprise software, healthcare, education, and the likes.
Awesome. So, whenever we get someone from the VC space here, we ask them to simplify the VC space in their own words so that even a 5-year-old can understand what a VC actually does.
Okay.
So, what is the VC world all about?
VC world is about providing money to fund ideas which cannot be funded in an ideal otherwise state. Right. To a 5-year-old, it means making risky investments, and one of your risky investments will provide you the next innovative or the next generation company which can make a ton of money. So that's what we do.
What makes an idea good, according to you?
In terms of VC world,
Yeah.
an idea makes sense when there is a clear problem to be solved, and when you solve that problem, the customer is willing to pay for that, not just now or for 1 or 2 times, for a long period of time. And even after a customer pays for that solution for a long period of time, after all the costs that you incur to provide the solution, you have to make money.
Got it.
So, in a gist, this is what makes any investment attractive.
But what's an ideal company for you? Let's say you're investing in a company. What are the key checkpoints? Let's say in B2B SaaS, what do you actually look for?
So, what I would prefer investing in an ideal company in B2B SaaS is the founder has some sort of experience in the field. They have a network, and they have experienced a problem, or they've identified a problem worth solving, and via the network they have validated the need.
Got it.
So this solves for 2 or 3 things. One is domain expertise. Second is validation of problem, and third is ready network of people who can pay for that solution. So at the end of the day, you just want to reduce all friction possible, and the path of least resistance is this.
Interesting. So you being not from the tech world particularly, how does it work? How do you figure out what B2B SaaS is good, what software is bad? Like what's your general lookout?
So I've been an investor all my professional life.
Yeah.
Right. The basics always apply. You want to look at a company which has the potential to make money, and after making money, it has to make some profit. So again, going back to the first question that you asked, is there a problem worth solving? Right. If you are you making technology to solve a problem, or is this technology finding a problem to solve? It's very simplistic, but there are two. It's like the differences between night and day.
Sure.
Right. So very rational, simple principles follow. You want to do it for long periods of time. You don't want to half-ass things. You don't want to go into get quick rich schemes where I'll build it for 2 years or 3 years and I'll make a ton of money. Nobody does because at times it takes 2 to 3 years, or we call it one business cycle, to understand whether customers like it or not, whether customers are willing to pay for it or not, whether you understand your industry well or not, and then you iterate over a period of time.
That's interesting. What are certain fascinating founders you've met who have changed the way you think?
So I give this example a lot of times. One of the founders that we have in our portfolio, the guys met in IIT Delhi, and one of the founders quit in the last semester
The college.
from IIT Delhi
Got
to
it.
start a company, because he said, I've identified what I want to do. I'm good at it. I don't need a degree to validate.
Got it.
And since, I think they've been building the business for about 7-8 years now.
What
and
company
they
is
are
this?
at about 3 million plus in revenue.
What company is
This
this?
is Video Cipher. So
Okay.
they make software which is video encryption. So they do video encryption software. So anti-piracy.
Got
I
it.
cannot copy, steal, screen grab anybody else's videos.
Interesting.
And they're at a 3 million run rate, and they've done this at almost no capital raised. They've
Interesting.
raised less than half a million maybe, and in the VC world
That's too low.
that's really amazing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so have you guys invested in that company?
Yes, we have.
Interesting. Well, what's fascinating about those founders? Like, is it because they love the problem so much, or they're way too good at building the solution?
So it's a combination of both. They have understood the problem, which they encountered while they were students at IIT Delhi, where they found out a lot of students like to watch pirated movies, and this is a multi-billion-dollar problem. But they did not go after that problem directly. They understood they have to go after people who actually make money off it, and SMEs who are affected because this is their bread and butter, and they cannot compete with the likes of a Netflix, right?
Sure.
So the niche that they found out was to go behind educational institutions who have these own content videos, which were again pirated.
Got
So
it.
that is how they found the niche, and now they have like 1,000 plus customers, and primarily in US, Brazil, Egypt, Southeast Asia. That's their market now.
Got it. Interesting. So, how did you get into the VC world? Like, is this the first industry you've ever picked and stayed on, or was there something different you did before, right after college? And how was your college life as well? Like, you can start from there.
Okay, my college life was a decade ago, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure how relevant it is now. But I did not really have any sort of plan when I was in college. I was a kid, right? I mean, you are a kid too, but I was at that point in time a kid who just wanted to get to the next stage, right? Everything was, you know, it was that everything had a backstop. If I don't do this, then this. If I don't do this, then that. Eventually, I figured out, I'm a Gujarati from a Gujarati family. All we've done all our lives is either run businesses or invest in the stock market. So I always had this, innate urge to be an investor, and I did my masters and all of that. And I had dabbled at my family business, and eventually I landed up at a PMS fund called Solidarity, and that was my first ever proper corporate job. Dr. Malpani is actually one of the anchor investors. He sits on the board. He's a investor in the company too, in the fund, and that's where I met him. And incidentally, I only met Dr. Malpani once before I moved to managing his
Malpani Ventures.
family office. Yeah.
Interesting.
So again, there was an opportunity. I asked if I could do it, and Doc said yes, despite me not having any background in venture capital.
So what was your
early
job
stage.
before? Like, it wasn't
So
VC specific.
yeah, I was an investor in the public equity space.
Got it.
So the listed equities in large, mid cap, small cap. Again, used to evaluate companies, make business models, talk to management, all of that, but in the listed space. Now I do the same in early stage.
But how different is that from your current job?
The concepts remain the same, but there's a stark difference. In listed equities, you have, these are very, very mature companies. So it's very difficult to see a company go from, let's say, 1,000 crore of revenue to either 2,000 crores in the next year or fall to 500 crores in the next year.
Got it.
You have a trajectory which is, give or take 20% deviation from the growth trajectory. So if you're growing at 15 to 20%, you will grow at 15 to 20%.
Sure.
Which means all the metrics below revenue are also somewhat in that
Got it.
trajectory. In the venture space, you can go from $0 to $1 million of revenue in a year,
It's all haywire.
and you can grow from 1 to 10 in a year. You can also grow from 1 to 0 in a year. So everything is amplified and magnified in the early stage, and there's not a lot of stability.
Got it.
And everything is a function of how early or how mature you are.
Interesting. That's fair. So, as you delved into the stock markets earlier before and you invested in
Yes.
public equities, how does that compare to crypto? Like, as you said, you don't invest in Web3 companies in general, but have you looked into that space? What do you think about it in general? Because it's not similar to the stock market, but
Yes.
it's sort of talked about as like two sides of the same coin to a certain degree. What do you
Yes.
think about that?
So the one core difference between stocks and crypto is that stocks have an underlying value,
Sure.
and that underlying value is the value of future. It's the future value of the present, the cash flows that the company generates.
Sure.
Uh, so I can be wrong in assessing the future value
Mm-hmm.
by some margin, but it cannot be zero because there is some underlying cash that the company generates every year.
Sure.
In the case of crypto, I don't know what is their underlying value.
Sure.
So I don't know whether I'm right or not.
Hmm.
And if I'm right, I'm sorry, if I'm right, it's a good thing. But if I'm wrong, I
You
don't know
lost
how
everything.
wrong I am
Yeah.
or by what margin.
Makes sense. But just thinking about it, it might sound stupid, but isn't it the same thing with traditional money? If you think about it, it's also just a piece of paper, and we're just believing that
Yeah.
100 rupees is 100 rupees.
Fair.
So
Yes.
if a ton of people, let's say, believe in crypto, can it to a certain degree be a medium of exchange at some point of time? It is still, but like a bit more mainstream.
Yes. So good question, right? I would say let's equate real money with a house,
Okay.
fiat currency with house,
Mhm.
and crypto with an NFT of the house.
An NFT of the house.
Right?
Okay. Okay.
What is the value of the house? I don't know.
Hmm.
I cannot be right because
Yeah.
the value is, you will perceive it to be different. I'll perceive it to be different. Some of the other
In
people will
similar
be.
magnitudes of.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
But am I willing to put some money in
Mm-hmm.
to make it, build it? Has some capital been spent to create it? Right? I can derive multiple valuations basis that. Let's say, I built a house, it cost me 20 lakhs to build it.
Sure.
I can say, okay, bare minimum, this house is valued at 20 lakhs.
Sure.
Or the land below it.
Hmm.
Right? I add some furniture, I say now it's worth 40 lakhs.
40 lakhs.
Random number, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how do I, even if 100 people trade the NFT of the same house, how do I know whether that value is right or not?
Interesting.
What is it based on? I can be wrong, but I'm saying I will never know how wrong I am. Can you trade that NFT for $1 million? Yes, you can. If there is a willing buyer, a willing seller, the deal happens and that is the value. But is it really valued at that? I don't know.
Sure.
Hence
sense.
the hesitation to explore that space or go deep into it.
So I get what you're saying, but for the most part, from what the comparison that I gauged was fiat currency, compared it with a house, and crypto as an
Yes.
NFT of the house. But to isn't that unfair? Because both of them, to a certain degree, are metrics of exchange, basic LOUs at some point.
I would say yes, but
I'm not a crypto guy, by the way. I'm just
I
picking
get
your
that.
brain.
Even
Yeah.
I'm not. So it's a good thought to have, right? In a way to challenge traditional thought processes. But I would take one additional step, right? Any country's currency is a derivation of the money supply, the GDP, the demand, all of it.
Sure.
I don't believe at any point in time that is a fictional number.
Okay. Yes.
Right? That's a real number. I don't know what the
Yes,
value
yes.
of it is, but the demand is real.
Got it.
The supply is also
Has
real.
to be somewhere. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know that for crypto.
No crypto.
Maybe 20 years down, 50 years down, we have World War III where fiat currency doesn't really matter. And I could argue even gold is
Sure.
NFT.
gold is, but it's linked with physical scarcity, right?
Right.
But even Bitcoin is, but
Right.
uh, yeah, but you can
I
still
could
successfully
argue, right,
mine.
that
Yeah,
gold, I don't think gold should be valued at what it is.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but does gold have its intrinsic application
Yes.
in certain industries?
It does. Yes. Sure.
That is governed by, again, demand and supply.
Hmm.
And that is how you say, no, the base price for gold should be this much because
Got
the
it.
use of gold is that much. I cannot say the same for.
So value of an entity should not be just dependent on the value of the entity,
Yes.
or it having some value. Interesting. What do you think about the technology layer of the crypto space? Like the way it's almost like a unforgeable ledger of sorts, where you can have records built into it and which cannot be easily altered, almost never be altered. And if it's
So,
altered, yeah.
so 2 points to this, right?
Yeah.
One is uh, Bitcoin as a blockchain protocol,
Yeah.
and Bitcoin as a currency. People often misinterpret.
Misinterpret.
Bitcoin blockchain protocol in itself is valuable.
Sure.
I cannot ascribe a value to it, but
It works essentially.
Yes, you have distinct nodes, you have proof
Hashes,
of
yes.
concept, you have you can track it, you can there are tons of things that you can do with it. There are are there applications for it?
Sure.
Taking the gold analogy, are there applications for it in certain industries? Let's say supply chain. Let's say escrow.
Escrow.
Let's say insurance. Right? Can we apply it? If we can apply it at scale, then yes, there is certain underlying value attached to it.
Sure. For
But
that to run, we need the underlying cryptocurrency, right? So does that not give it like a particularly feasible use case?
It does.
It
It does.
does.
But my point is that
Yeah.
unlike gold, which has been actually utilized,
Yes.
we've not seen the Bitcoin blockchain utilized at scale, right? In
Okay.
distinct use cases over a period of time.
So you
Once
mean
that
mass
happens,
adoption is something
Yes.
you would look for before
Yes.
trusting the space enough.
Yep.
That's interesting. What do you think about the general crypto crash? Like, do you think that was bound to happen? Do you think the correction was required to a certain degree? It happened last year.
Well, we see this happen in stock
Yeah,
markets
yeah,
every few
sure.
years, right? So
But it's very different with the stock market because there's literally no governing body, at least on the crypto space.
fair,
Yeah.
but I would say 100 years ago there was no governing body for stock markets.
Sure, but makes sense. Makes sense.
So I think when the 1929 crash happened in the US, were there governing bodies which are as stringent
I
as
guess
they are
not.
today? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
So maybe everything is like it's evolutionary. It takes a certain amount of time before people start governing it and protecting the minority investors.
Interesting.
Do similar crashes happen in the public equity space, stock markets? Yes.
Really? To
Yeah.
this magnitude?
Yes, I've seen companies lose 99% of their value.
Interesting.
So it's not unheard of, it's not unfathomable, it's just new.
Maybe because the players in the crypto
Yes.
space are so
Yes.
they
Maybe
can
they've
count
seen
them
the
on
first
fingers.
crash in their life.
Yeah.
But if you ask someone who is 55 years old or 60
They've
years
seen
old
it,
and
yeah,
they've
sure.
seen probably 3 or 4 of these crashes that happen in their stock markets.
Maybe the hype or maybe the panic on it is so high because the number of people actually playing in the crypto space are low. Like even if one or two go down, the entire space is almost collapsed. Like whereas in the equity markets, there's still a number of players. I mean, one player dying wouldn't really. It would change.
It would.
the
If
thing.
it's a large player, it
Yeah,
would.
yeah, sure. I
If
mean,
it's a
very large player,
small players die every
Yeah,
day, right?
it
So
doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
really change things.
fair.
Interesting. What's have you read the Indus Valley report?
Bits and pieces, yes.
Yes. What have you gauged from it?
I think India is a place to be.
Really?
Yes.
That's okay. Interesting. What do you think about the India 1, India 2, India 1 alpha segregation that Amal made in the report and Sajid made in the report? Do you think it's
think
a good way to classify?
A lot of classifications are some things that you do to simplify.
Yeah,
right?
sure. 100%.
So are these the right classifications? I don't know.
In order to
but
study
can
India,
you-
let's say on an
yes,
economical stage,
Yes.
the way apps are built, the way money is driven into the app
Yes.
space. What do you think about that? Do you really think the India 2 market is difficult to build on top of is it difficult to generate revenue? And the India 2 market is basically people, a bunch of people who have who contribute less than 10% to their
Yes.
GDP. So how do you think is building for that market? Like, do you think that space is profitable? Do you think it makes sense to build? Because there have been various examples which have not really turned out to be perfect, right? For example, I mean, Misho just posted like a profitable quarter, but still the way its customer feedback is, it's not that great. The way the outrages on Twitter, even ShareChat, for example, they have
Yeah.
infinitely more users, active users maybe than Snapchat in India, but they make less money than Snapchat uh, in comparison, whatever, to the Indian users. So, in general, what do you think about building for the India 2 space? Or if, let's say, someone's building, what's the ideal way to build? Or what to expect and what not to expect?
So India 2 is difficult.
India 2 is
Right.
difficult.
The Indian, I would even say India 1, right?
Really?
We are not accustomed to paying for
Sure.
things, right? But as the disposable incomes are growing, we are seeing that slight shift in the mindset.
Sure.
10 years ago, uh, I would not think of people who would be happily taking cabs which are costing rupees 500, right?
Sure.
An entire family could go watch a movie in 500 rupees.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're spending it on one experience per person. So
Yes.
as incomes rise,
Mm-hmm.
the propensity to spend kind of also increases. As women join the workforce, right, they tend to spend some, save some. And that saving at some point in time also becomes consumption.
Yes.
Right. So it's a process. It may take 5 years or 10 years for India to start contributing to more of the GDP. Maybe more years, right? I'm not sure. But that change will come.
Interesting.
You have to do 2 to 3 things right. You have to understand distribution. Can I reach those customers in a very cost effective manner?
Sure.
Right. Second is, am I building something which is really of value?
Hmm. Sure.
Misho is a good example, right?
Yeah.
People want to spend. People are aware. People are online. People are transacting.
Sure.
It's a matter of whether I am really building the right kind of solution for them or not.
Got it.
If I do, I will not get the entirety of India 2. Can I get 5% of it? Can I get 10% of it? Right.
You're saying like look for niches in India to fix their problems.
Yes. And the last point is how it's again a very nuanced point, right? But how do you assess whether this is a customer set which will pay me for long periods of time? So these are 2-3 questions in itself. One is, do you build something for recurring revenue? Do you provide enough value so that these guys will pay you for long periods of time? And third is the cost justified? Because you can do 1 and 2 right, but if it costs you more than customers are willing to pay, then again you kind of fall into the same trap.
Interesting.
It's we'll get there. Maybe in 20 years we'll see India 2 also generating revenue for some of these larger companies. You need to get the timing right. For example, Jio was at inflection point for internet in India.
But wouldn't you argue if that was like more of an infrastructure thing than like a product thing?
You need to have the timing right.
Sure.
I could have brought Amazon to India in 2005, but I would not have made a difference.
Yes.
So are you 5 years too early? Are you 10 years too early? Are you may be targeting the right people, you may be offering the right solution, but you may be offering at the right price point, but these guys are not aware.
Sure.
If they are aware, they are 5 years away from being able to spend on it.
Interesting.
So is the timing right?
I think it's similar to how the AR VR space kind of died out. I mean, earlier, now it's coming back, but the way it died out. Have you tried AR VR?
Yes.
What's your general take on it? Did you enjoy VR games or did you not just play?
So, let's aggregate AR, VR, haptics, motion sensors, all of that in one bucket, right? We had Nintendo Wii, come in 10, 12,
Years ago?
yeah,
Nintendo Wii?
10, 12, 15 years
Yeah.
ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then came the Xbox about 8, 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago again, right? We didn't see. So there is one customer set which has seen these. There's a new customer set which is now with like the goggles and all of that. AR first, right? AR and VR first. There is a use case for it. Again, two questions here. AR VR from the point of view of entertainment, and AR VR from the point of view of education or real world use cases, right? Both have their distinct
Advantages,
spaces,
disadvantages, yes.
advantages, disadvantages, price points, and so on and so forth. But yes, immersive experiences are something that people will prefer. I prefer.
Yes, sure.
I would not want to start playing games on my mobile phone anymore if I have the
once you've
opportunity
experienced
or
it,
the
yeah, sure.
affordability is kind of not in the question.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, I think any technology is welcome as long as you can find the right persons to buy for it and
Interesting.
use it.
Why do you think it died out 2 years ago?
I think too many companies started doing it.
Really? Because I've used HTC Vive back in the day, and that was probably the only headset that was like marketed to me. That's the only headset whose ads I was shown.
No, so there were companies doing it. They did not
Launch or something.
go to market, right?
Okay.
A lot of companies were doing it, and people soon found out that everybody's building the same product.
Like just the
Right.
headset
Yeah. Second is price points.
was very expensive then.
It was very expensive at that point in time because the R&D required was so high.
Yes.
Right. And third, I think it was market awareness, right? You need to educate, you need to make the market aware, you need to make the market get used to some of these things. I think Apple launched these glasses.
new ones.
Again,
Yes,
they
they
didn't
did.
kind of work out.
Back in the day?
Recently,
The
a few
ones
years
right
ago,
now, no?
yeah.
Okay, yeah, those are working pretty well, I guess.
Not as much as the
Oh, yeah, sure.
Apple
I mean,
products usually work out.
yeah, the adoption is, I wouldn't say bleak, but it's still, I mean, it still is there.
Not as
Yeah.
I think I don't see any Apple product which has not worked out.
Sure, 100%.
Right? But this hasn't.
Makes sense. In
The
terms of
iPod,
adoption,
the
yes.
iPad, MacBooks.
Maybe it's because it's too intimidating to use, because nobody has technically experienced it ever before.
Yep.
Because if you had the iPhone before, you know what an iPad would ideally look like. What ideally.
But we
would
didn't
feel
have
like.
an iPhone before.
You had some form of smartphone before.
No.
Really? That was the first.
I mean, I think 2005-07 was the first time smartphones became really smart, right?
Sure. Makes sense. Well, do you think it was to do with Steve Jobs' way of presenting it?
I mean, you can present it the right way, but people need to buy it, use it, keep on using it again and again. I can sell you one ad. I can sell you 2 ads. I can't make you buy 10 iPhones.
Sure, makes sense. Do you think there's an intrinsic need of storytellers for tech guys?
Yes.
How do you become a good storyteller?
You learn, right? One is you have to learn. It's not a skill which everybody gets themselves. To some extent, tech guys also become a bit too detached.
From the real world?
Not from the real world, right? From the problem. They are
okay.
so focused on building the solution that they sometimes get detached from what the real problem is. Who are they solving the problem for? At the end of the day, you need, a hero, a villain, a bridge between the hero and a villain, right?
Yes.
And how do you make the other person look good? I think what Steve Jobs did well is he knew how to give these, amazing presentations without aids, anything like that, right?
Yeah.
He spoke a lot. He spoke less. He could convey his point in
Concisely.
shorter words or shorter sentences, and he spoke to people in the way people wanted to. People spoke to other people, right? You can say, I am bringing next generation cutting edge palm device which will enable you to store 256 GB of data.
There's a bunch
I
of
don't
jargons
know
for a
what is
normal
that.
person to understand. Yeah.
You tell me I can listen to 1,000 phones. There's 1,000 songs in one small device. You tell me I can click 5,000 photographs,
Yeah. Makes sense.
right? You could tell me you can download 100 apps on your phone.
Interesting.
Because that is how we as human beings will talk to each other
Sure.
without jargon.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Considering storytelling, do you consider yourself as a good storyteller? And how's your storytelling experience been like? How were you before?
I had to learn it a bit. Um, it takes some time, but if you can get it's not something which cannot be learned.
Mm-hmm.
If you get some basics right, you will be able to do it. My experience has been somewhat better because I consider myself to be able to tell a story. I need to do it better in shorter words. But yeah, I think storytelling is an essential way to capture people's attention, and if you don't have attention, it's very difficult to do anything with them.
Interesting.
You do podcasts. You have to uh, tell a story. You have to spin it. Sometimes you have to form a narrative
Yeah.
because people you and I, let's go back to our younger days. We learned a lot of things because our parents told us stories.
Sure.
We saw a lot of movies because we could identify the stories in them, the moral of the story,
Yeah.
right? There was always a hero, there was always a villain,
Mm-hmm.
there was always, we hated the villains, we loved the heroes. We didn't know why.
Yes.
But if you change the character of the hero and the villain, if you interchange them, and the hero is now playing the villain, you will again start hating the villain,
Yes.
despite the same guy being the hero earlier, right? So people associate emotions with that, and the moment you associate emotions, it becomes that much more easier to talk to them, to relate to them.
Yes. Do you think the simplicity in imposing bipolarity in a story, like this is good, this is bad, makes it easier for people, or at least the
Yes.
masses to understand?
Yes.
Don't you think it's to a certain degree hiding them from
Yes.
some truth? How do you mitigate that and make sure it's morally / ethically right while telling a story?
You ask one simple question, right? What is the objective of it? Right? What is the CTA? Right?
Yeah.
If you do it in a way where they call it, intellectual honesty.
Mm-hmm.
If
White
you have,
lies.
yes, if you can be intellectually honest with yourself, you can get away with a lot of things.
Interesting.
That's right. You do tell the audience that A is right and B is wrong, right? In a way, you are forming an opinion yourself about what the audience should feel about a certain thing.
Interesting. Very interesting.
We also need to understand the West does it differently. In the West, there are a lot of gray area movies where you don't have a clear cut demarcation of good and bad.
Makes sense.
Most characters are at times gray.
Yeah.
We don't have it here. It also is a certain level of maturity of the audience. If you just talk about movies here,
Makes sense.
but I think we're getting there.
Sure. Do you think it's because there's more cynicism in the people in the West and less here? There's more of worship in that takes place, at least in India. So it's easier for movie producers or whatever creators to just induce white and black.
Yes.
Whereas there, it's like people would like to.
I would like to say, people are cynical in both ends of the world.
Really? Don't you think
yeah.
like us Indians are not as cynical as the West?
We are. I think it's whether you are Eastern or Western, you are a human being, right? And we all have the same set of emotions or same set of mentality. As a herd, we are one. The difference is
culturally very different. So
the culture is different.
Affect the way we perceive emotions.
Yes. The agenda that you have while doing something also narrates why you do it. So if let's say movie making, what's your agenda? Do you want to make it into a blockbuster? Yes, let's do it black and white. I will sell tickets. Do you want to make cinema?
Oh, then that's dicey.
I don't care about my audience, or do
Yeah.
if I sell 500 crore worth of tickets. I
Hmm.
want to make good cinema. I'll introduce an element of grey. Not a lot of people will understand it.
Yeah, it's almost the same scale versus nuance argument which takes place all the time. The only person who has managed to crack that code is Nolan. I guess no one else has.
Fair.
Who else comes to your mind? Are you into movies?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
What do you watch usually?
Anything.
What are your usual three go-tos?
So I like crime. I like documentaries, and
Hmm.
I like masala.
Like masala. Interesting. Have you watched Black Mirror by any chance?
No.
Never? You should. I mean, at least for uh, every tech guy or person, at least in the tech space, or quote unquote associated with the tech space, who are sort of fascinated by how the future would pan out, I think Black Mirror is something
You were
everybody
the
should
second
watch.
person who's told me that. So now
Who's
I
the
think
first
I
person
need
who has told you that?
a friend of mine from NMIMS.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Because the thing with Black Mirror is like the way they have um, cre- it's always like this one thing. If this is the way this is, so they introduced AR VR there as well. Like they were like the games would be very immersive, and then they showed the problems that can arise from there, and there was an entire story about it. And the other episode was something like about privacy, like the way companies were just stealing the privacy,
Yes.
and then they just the next day this person's life was sort of built into a Netflix series. Like every day was a new episode, like something like that. That's why you should watch it. Okay,
Cool.
coming back to the startup space. What is a peculiar thing that you notice in founders, like which you have seen in every founder, at least who is doing it right?
They're madly passionate. I keep telling people that you have to be a certain level of crazy
Hmm.
in order to leave everything behind and fall into this world of uncertainty with all the odds stacked against you,
Mm-hmm.
and opening up yourself to ridicule, rejection, and everything wrong that goes on with venture building and startups.
Interesting.
You need to balance all of the negativity with some sort of craziness that you have.
Got it. So has a founder ever failed in your portfolio?
Companies have.
Yeah.
Founders.
My bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Companies.
Companies have.
How does that pan out? How does that look like?
So failure is always welcome.
Hmm.
It's so for us, failure is welcome.
Yeah.
I can't speak for the startup
funds.
community as a whole, but for us, failure is welcome because that means you've tried.
Mm-hmm.
We have a principal investor who's willing to manage failure
Mm-hmm.
because in his mind, the learning agenda tops financial return.
Yes.
And failure also means that at some point in time you become that much more self-aware.
Hmm.
So one of our USPs to look for founders is that we want to work with founders who are failed entrepreneurs, second-time entrepreneurs who have quit their jobs, started out, did not work out, they have a bunch of learnings. Now, as they want like a second chance,
Got
right?
it.
These are usually a bit more knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
They're self-aware. They are less risk-taking, right?
Less risk taking.
So now they want to build real businesses.
Got
They don't
it.
want to go for
Vanity metrics or any
hit it
numbers.
out of the park or I'm rolled out.
Got it. That's very interesting. Why do you think the VC space, quote unquote, I wouldn't say died out, but the volume of money driven into it reduced last year?
Again, it's a function of demand and supply, right?
Really?
Yes, two things happened. One is a lot of these older funds who had invested a ton of money,
Mm-hmm.
they could not see the return materialize.
Okay.
So a lot of older funds could not get capital for their new funds.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Second is you have to understand VC to some extent, and people will hate me for this, is a Ponzi scheme.
It's a Ponzi. Why? Why is it a Ponzi scheme?
Because early stage investors stick their product to later stage investors, who stick their product to pre-IPO investors, who stick their product to public investors.
What? Wait, you have to go slow. What does that mean?
So if I invest in a company in
Yes.
the very early stage, right? If I am a hardcore investor,
Okay.
I need to see that company raise one more round.
Got
Right.
it. Mm-hmm.
The other, if even if I know my company is not doing perfectly well, I will encourage it to raise some money, right? It may succeed or not, but once it's out of, once somebody else has also invested in it, the next round guy now assumes responsibility
Got
because
it.
that guy has put in more money than I have,
Hmm.
and that guy
Will try his best to make
will
sure the
try
company.
to
Got it.
yes. So I think I wrote a blog about this too. That the pre-IPO stage investors realized that a lot of growth investors had sold them bad product
Got it.
and they refused to buy more of it.
Hmm.
So the growth stage investors in turn went to early investors and said, the product you are selling to me is bad.
It's bad.
So I don't want that. So
Got it.
early stage investors now recalibrated.
Got it. So, do you think it's always better to figure out a pre-seed investor first, make sure the product is scaling well, and then look for like proper institutional investors?
You never know.
It depends on the product.
You
as well.
never know,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So
Hmm.
it's if see the startup world is such that even if you do everything right, there is a risk that somebody else will come in and disrupt you.
Sure.
So you don't know what goes wrong when it goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What you can do is try to be honest with yourself whether I'm really building a company or just I'm building something to sell it to somebody else.
Interesting. Have you seen those type of funders who
Yes.
want an exit, who just
Yes,
wanted
a
to
lot,
sell?
there are distinct sub segments of some founders want to build the same company for a decade or more. There are some founders who say 5 years I'm out.
That's what they say to you, like
Yeah, they want to build and sell it. They
how does
want to
that sound
exit.
to an investor?
There are buyers for all kinds of
Sure.
stuff, right? So
What about you?
I would take it in two ways. Sometimes I like the clarity of thought that I know the founder wants to exit in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if they play the cards right, they will be able to.
Yes.
And if they do, I'm assuming they'll create some
Some
value
return,
for
yes.
their stakeholders.
Sure.
But if the founder is not being honest with themselves, and if they want to exit in 5, but they are saying that no, I'm building this for the next generation,
Got it.
the incentives aren't
Yeah,
aligned.
sure.
So
Makes sense.
it's about how it plays out and whether what the game you are playing is actually the game you want to play or not.
Very interesting. Okay, so I read your blog a couple of weeks ago. You spoke about education inflation in one of those. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes. So, when I went to school, my school fees were about 300 to 400 rupees a month, I think. My nephew is about 2.5 years old, and they're looking for schools for him, and the damn school is costing about 20,000 a month.
Yeah, easily.
He's 2.5
yes.
years old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
easily.
So, is education inflation a reality? Yes. Has it outstripped every other inflation known to us? Kind
Outstripped
of, yes.
as in overtaken.
It is overtaken,
Got it.
yes. Kind of it has, right? So but education is a real need. Right?
Yeah.
There are India has what 20% of people under the age of 18, I think. What a third, maybe more than a third are under the age of 13.
30% are like less than
Right,
28 or
yeah.
something. Yeah.
So it's a real need. You need to develop the next level of the next segment of people who are going to be the next youth. The youth are going to be the next earning age population. So yeah, it's a real need which needs to be solved, and that's what we try to do at Malpani Ventures.
What would you like to say about the factory analogy that you used before we started recording?
We have to realize at some point in time that India has so many people
Sure.
that it is so difficult to not see anything turn into a factory.
Yeah.
For example, the college that I went to when I was a student there, we had 200 people, 240 people in one batch. The last I spoke to somebody from the college, some professor, they said they have 600 people now.
Yeah.
Right. The quality of when that course first started, there were only 60 people
Yeah.
chosen from all of India
Mm-hmm.
to attend that course. When I joined, there were only 240 people from all of India who joined that course. There are
Got it.
now 600.
Hmm.
But there are maybe 10 lakh more who actually want to apply for these, are not able to,
Hmm.
right? So the good colleges or the brand names
Mm-hmm.
can utilize or leverage their branding, their firepower to keep on adding one
Adding.
more assembly line to it by adding one
Yeah.
more batch.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Like, to be fair, like, more people educated makes sense. Well, it's always better because we have that much youth here. But as you said, like, it might lead to some compromise on the quality of education because more people, less attention to one student and whatnot, the way the cliches are. So,
Yes, the trade-off is very real,
yeah.
but the quality is still good, I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
At least for the top ones, like, yeah.
Even again, there are so many people in India,
Yeah.
right? If I say, if there are 1 crore good students, there 1% of India is top quality.
Got
Out
it.
of 150 crores, that's 1.5 crore people.
Yeah.
That 1.5 crore people is, I think, what, 5% of US?
Yes.
Because 35 crore population in the US, which is about 1.5 or something like that,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
So the sheer number of people in itself makes the number daunting. But if you look at it relatively, if 1% of talent is really, really amazing, we still have 1.5 crore.
Makes sense. We
So
are
it's,
dangerous
yeah.
workforce.
So
Yeah.
we don't. I don't think quality can be an issue. The absolute number is something that makes us feel worried. But relatively, I think we're still good.
What do you think about the education space in general now? Do you think the way it's progressing, do you think it's going in a good way, or do you think it's just on a verge of downfall in the next couple of
Education,
years?
the education space in itself needs a lot of
Freeform?
uh, no, it needs a lot of push.
Push.
I would say
Okay.
I don't think we've scratched the surface.
You mean a lot more people can be educated, or
Yes,
interesting?
we've not scratched the surface. The we are now looking at Finnish way of education.
What is the Finland way?
The Finland way,
Got it.
right? How many people can afford it? Right. What is the target market for that? But we have so many people who are ready to learn, who are willing to learn. We don't have the means, right? So if we are able to take some of the good things and give it to crores of people who are willing to do it, who are actually deserving, we can make a hell lot of difference. But we've not even scratched the surface.
Interesting.
Now, if you look at the ed tech industry, I think the incentives were misaligned.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to be the billion-dollar company. To be a
It was a
billion-dollar
race,
company,
yes.
you had to sell 100 million worth of product. To sell 100 million worth of product at $1 a pop, you had to find 100 million customers. Further 100 million customers to begin with, right? So was that TAM, the fallacy of TAM? Was there a market in itself? Maybe not. Maybe 10 years later the market
Sure.
can exist because people will have that income and will be willing to pay, will be savvy internet buyers.
Yes.
Because people move from buying clothes, shoes, electronics, uh, uh, you know,
Now to
movie
education.
tickets,
Yeah.
experiences,
Yeah.
education, so on and so forth, right?
Got it.
I think we're in the middle of, somewhere. India too still buys clothes, shoes, electronics now online.
Yeah.
They've not yet moved to experiences.
Got it.
Education is one of the biggest experiences to buy online.
Interesting. To talk on that, why do you think the numbers of online transaction in India too are so less? And what can we do to change that?
It's a trust deficit, I think.
Trust deficit.
One
How do you
is-
build trust?
How do you build trust?
Because I've asked this question to a couple of people, and everybody had like different answers. And I'll tell you one of my favorite answers once you tell me your answer. Let's see how those compare.
Building trust is not easy.
Okay.
It's a very important thing to do, but building trust is not very easy. So how do you do it? Let's say you want to spur India to start making digital transactions. You bring somebody who looks, seems, feels trustworthy to promote it. The way mutual funds have started leveraging Indian cricketers to say, Sachin
Got it.
Tendulkar comes on an ad and says mutual fund sahi hai. Okay. The vast
Makes sense.
majority of people who saw Sachin Tendulkar carry Indian cricket team on his shoulders, they'll now kind of start following him. But the online transaction piece goes two ways, right? I think India has outranked every other economy in digital transactions the moment we say UPI has entered the space.
You mean in sheer terms of value?
In value and
volume, volume.
In value terms and volume as well,
terms.
right?
Okay.
I think Pix in Brazil is the fastest growing, but in terms of value,
UPI is
yes, UPI is much higher.
Got it. Makes logical sense. I'll tell you what Amal told me, right? So what he said was every piece of technology which is new, even if it's losing money, even if it's making money, it has to stay alive for at least n number of years, let's say 10 years, so that everybody knows the name at the back of the head, and then they start building trust. That's what he said. What do you think about this? Do you think keeping a piece of technology or infrastructure alive for long would make people trust it more? Because obviously, it's more quote unquote relevant to them. It's been around for a while. And is it the right way to build infrastructure for, let's say, India too?
So if it is public infrastructure, let's say we have UPI and now we have ONDC.
Yeah.
I would say yes. Right. Keep it public. Keep it free.
Keep it alive.
And keep it alive.
Yeah.
Right. But if it is not public infrastructure, people are very quick to move on to the next big thing, the next shiny thing. So there is a trade-off between the two.
Oh, give me examples. Like what?
Let's say, I think the oldest public infrastructure that we have is post office.
Yeah.
Right. The post office has been in existence since donkey ages, right? Do people trust it? Yes.
Yes. They do. They trust it with money as well.
Right. Our parents would have invested in the post office savings schemes. Yeah. They would have gotten 4%, 5% returns,
but still,
right?
but
they still did it.
Yeah.
They felt relatively safe because one of the government institutions is backing it. LIC.
Yes.
Right. For n number of years, they kept it alive. I think, and now LIC is kind of keeping the Indian stock markets alive because they own 5 to 7% of almost every Indian company. There's a certain element of trust over there. But now I come to the private side. Is Snapdeal alive?
Not really. No.
Does it warrant staying, like keeping it alive on oxygen?
No.
If you have a Flipkart or you have a Meesho now, or if you have an Amazon, right?
No.
So people will be quick to move on to the next big thing if it's a public space. It's a private space. In the public space, if it is really systemically significant, yes, it warrants keeping it alive for some period of time. Yeah.
I wouldn't say replicable, but if it's with more money, if you can build something and if you can push discounts, then maybe it's not worth it to keep it alive just to build trust. Makes sense. Interesting. I had another question. So this is a tweet. I have taken a screenshot of it. Let me know if I'll put this up on the screen if you guys, whatever. So this is from Arno Sahu. This is what it says.
Yep.
Do you think this happens?
Yes.
Have you seen it happening?
First part, no. Second part, yes.
Second part, yes.
I think
just meetings for
yes.
Got it.
Yes.
And
we keep on telling our portfolio companies, the moment our funding is announced, we have people reach out to us saying that please introduce us to them. And we know because we keep on interacting with these guys, we talk to them, and they don't respond when there's an actual conversation or to build a relationship. But the moment something like this transactional happens, they're quick to say, can you please introduce us to these companies? And yes, we don't mind introducing you, but the warning goes out to the portfolio company that please Do not share any sensitive details.
Got it.
You have enough cash for the next 2 years or 3 years. You don't need to fundraise right now. So please only share information which you feel comfortable being in the public domain.
Interesting. Very interesting. What do you think is the ethical way to ask for information in terms as a VC to companies, or do you just never do it unless you're interested?
Just be honest.
Let's be honest. Really? Okay, so I was just wondering about this idea of like last night. Is there like a platform for investors where companies can come and leave reviews, like how like the experience was?
I think somebody has.
Is it really widely used?
The Eximius partner, founder, Pearl Agarwal, she had started a platform where founders could leave anonymous reviews of how VCs or individual VCs from larger VC funds have interacted with them, treated them. I'm not sure about the name.
Yeah,
maybe we
how
can
did
put it
that
out
pan out
later.
though?
I'm honestly not sure. It's the issue here. I'll tell you is that there are 10,000 founders and there are 10 investors.
Yeah.
Even if you know that this one investor is probably not doing things the right way,
you still have to go to them at some
you still
point.
have to, because there are only so many
sense.
people, right?
Makes sense. So it's is it really that scarce, like 10 to 10,000?
Yeah.
Why is that so? Not a lot of people are willing
It's
to push in money.
Money is always
interesting.
in the hands of a few.
Interesting. Do you guys, at least at Malpani Ventures, have you thought of releasing reports, releasing stuff which other VC companies are trying to do?
So in what sense?
Because a lot of other VC companies release thesis reports, like the way Bloom has done, like existing data. They just push that into a well-researched document. Have you guys thought of doing that? Because I asked that recently, and it's, from what I figured, it's good marketing for the LPs.
Yes.
So
yes, content marketing is a really sought after way of kind of build your brand positioning, image. We have not tried the thesis way. We have released one thesis, by the way, in B2B software, which I'm very proud of. But instead, we try to send good reads every week to our, not just our portfolio companies. I think now hundreds of people read it online.
Is that via your Substack, or is it?
Yes, via Substack.
Okay, interesting.
Even so, writing blogs every day, every week, to share some information or nugget in some way or the other is our way of doing content marketing. Right.
Interesting.
Again, content has different pieces, like in the infographics, there are theses, the documents, there are webinars, podcasts. I think because we're a small team, we're a 2-member team, we don't have the luxury of spending a certain amount of time to create very well detailed documents. But what we can do is send out these shorter format posts.
I wish I did it, because Dr Malpani has like insane reach on Twitter.
Yep.
And if you push out one report, and if he just tweets it once or twice, I don't think it'll get anywhere less than 20,000 impressions in one day.
More.
Yeah, obviously.
More.
I mean, if you guys need any people to help you out with, I mean,
we have
always there. Really?
Yeah.
You have the people ready, because you just said it's a 2-man team.
No, we have the people to push it. We don't have people to create it.
Yeah, if you want people to create it, I mean, we're always there if you want any help.
Done.
Interesting. I have another question which I noted it down. 1 second. Exactly this one. What's been the worst pitch that's been ever shown to you? You obviously will not share the name.
Join us, or you will miss out on the best opportunity of your life. You'll regret not joining us, which is one. Another is I'm Siddharth, right? But it was to Dear Rohan.
No way.
Happens a lot of times.
I mean,
there are some pitches where
it can be a genuine mistake, but whatever.
In 3 emails.
Then that's crude. That's crude. I might have done it once or twice, but like
even I've done. I'm guilty of it too, right?
Yeah.
But
you know who I did it to?
Sorry.
You know who I did it to?
Who?
I believe it was. I believe it was Vatsal Kanakia. I believe it was from 100x. But he's pretty chill with that.
He's chill. He's a cool guy.
Even I think he's like around the same age as Amal as well, 25, 26.
Yeah, I think so. True.
Like, is it just now or like the age, the range has changed in the VC space? Because from what I remembered, like 2-3 years ago, I only saw like pretty old guys in the VC space. Now a bunch of younger ones are entering. How do you think that does that change the space?
It has, right?
Yeah.
Let's say 20 years ago when VC first started in India,
Mm-hmm.
the guys were ex private equity investors or ex builders themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Those were typically 40, 45-year-old guys
Yeah.
investing. 10 years later, we had our first bunch of people who were successful employees in companies who had
Mm-hmm.
some experience in consulting or technology, started doing it. Maybe they were 30 years old. Now we have a bunch of people who have grown up looking at these 30-year-olds,
Yeah.
emulating, wanting to emulate them.
Mm-hmm.
And the first job out of college is probably to be a VC, right?
Hmm.
So the age has gradually
Not done.
dropped. Uh, but it may also be the case that we're seeing it now become mainstream. There were 25-year-old
Yes.
investors earlier too, but we didn't know what VC was 20 years ago. So we never paid attention to it.
Makes sense. Don't you think being older in the VC space is a form of an advantage because you've seen more?
It is a boon and a bane,
Yeah.
both.
Because it induces biases, I'm just guessing.
Yes. So the boon is that you have seen that much more.
Mm-hmm.
You're not enamored by A, get quick rich,
Yeah.
and B, the fancy new thing because you've seen 50 fancy new things kind of
Interesting.
fall out of favor. But it is a bane because sometimes you can really miss out on the next big thing.
Hmm.
My father would not be so excited about uh, some consumer internet, any consumer internet, for example. Right?
Sure.
I would not be so enthusiastic about crypto, for example.
Yeah, sure.
Right. Inherently, those biases kind of lead you to, miss out on opportunities which are good.
Sure.
So you in investing, you can only make two mistakes, right?
Right
Don't
company,
invest
good
in the right company,
Okay.
or invest in
In
the
the
wrong
wrong
company.
company. Yes.
Right. I think by the law of the power law that we apply, you can invest in a ton of wrong companies because you are one winner. We kind of pay off for all of the
Sure. Yeah.
losers, but you need to find that.
No, it's very difficult.
So what do you optimize for? To avoid investing in the wrong company or to avoid missing the right company?
Got it. Got it. Makes
And
sense.
that kind
Yeah.
of tends to
The right
play into the
company.
fear of missing out.
That's fair. I mean, if you have quote unquote biases, or let's say, I think biases, maybe policies, because you maybe understand certain feeds better than maybe the newer ones while investing, it will probably lead to a higher conversion rate regardless. So, I mean, it's a good thing.
I don't think so.
Really?
Very honestly, no. I don't think age. I don't think I can make a better decision than a 20-year-old just because I've like 10 more years than the guy. Similarly, I don't think a 60-year-old can make a better decision than a 30-year-old. It's about a specific opportunity or whether you
Sure.
understand it or not.
Makes sense.
And then that only comes if you've spent enough time, whether you are 20 or 40 or 60.
Interesting. Speaking about hype and opportunity, what do you think about the current AI space? How do you think it's changing? What do you think will pan out in the near future? How do you think the world will look like?
I like AI.
You like AI?
I'm not going to
Everybody
be-
does. I mean, who
I'm
doesn't?
not going to say I do not. But as is the case with every hype and every hype cycle that we see, you have to separate the good from the bad.
Sure.
Now, good means there is actually you own the underlying data. You've done your fancy technological stuff to create your own layer of artificial intelligence,
Makes sense.
and you are solving a real problem. On the flip side, if you are using someone else's data, integrating with a third party AI, and you are just like a UI layer on top of it,
Yeah.
you are just a front end, you open yourself up to platform risk.
Yeah.
And platform risk is not good.
Okay, coming back to AI, we were talking about rappers and how there's a platform risk problem. So there was this event that happened a couple of, I think, weeks ago where Sam Altman flew to Triple IT Delhi, and people asking him a couple of questions. And there was another press event where people asking him questions. And okay, there's this gentleman who raised this question to Sam Altman, which was, is it possible for a few Indian folks, a couple of 3-4 engineers with $10 million of investment to build something which is comparable to what OpenAI has built? And Sam's answer was straight up, no, it's not feasible for anyone to compete with them, at least at $10 million funding. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a sad reality and we should accept the monopoly, or do you think there can still be scope of some competition coming up? At least, let's say from the open source spaces. Let's say if you go on Hugging Face, you'll find a lot of open source algs, which they function really well. I mean, not as great as OpenAI, but for the most part they're good. So do you think there is still scope of competition for OpenAI?
Yes. Immediately, I don't think so.
Interesting.
Over a period of time, yes. I think inherently Indians are talented. We have the ability, and we've kind of now shown the world that we can reach places of, intellectual importance, right? But is the opportunity set available for these guys in India?
Opportunity
Is
set.
anybody going to fund them, back them? I don't think so.
Barely.
We're not even backing simple ideas. We're not. We have to understand, in the West, venture capital started in the 1960s, right? In India, venture capital started as an offshoot of the Western venture capital
Got it.
in 2000s.
Yes.
Indian venture capital started in the last decade. So technically, Indian venture capital is in its second decade of existence and operations, right? So we're not as mature as we need to be. Our LP base is, again, a majority of the LPs are not Indians.
Really?
So
Is it? Does that come under FDI if you think about it, or does it not?
in a way, yes.
In a way, yes. Got it. A lot of LPs are just not Indians. Are they
A lot
just
of LPs are.
like
See,
NRIs?
most institutions are not Indians.
Yeah, so there's like a big investment fund. There's an India wing to it.
Yes.
Something like that. Interesting. Very interesting. How does that? So how does like an India wing differ from, let's say, an Indian original venture firm? What are the things that happen differently there?
I think the way you make decisions, the kind of decisions you want to make, I think both of these are different. And again, the argument is whether you are decentralized or centralized. Can you make your own decisions, or you have to follow someone else's coattails,
Protocols,
or
yes.
ride in someone else's coattails? If you do that, are those guys sitting in India to look at the opportunity set?
Makes sense.
So I think homegrown always is better. If let's say I'm in somewhere in Southeast Asia, I can't invest in Southeast Asia sitting from India.
Got it. Makes sense.
Or I need to invest in a mature company where I don't have to be on the ground.
Like early stage opportunities are will be
Yes,
difficult to take
yes.
bets on. Interesting. Okay, so coming back to VC, has there been an opportunity that you passed on, and which you regret now? Like you passed on an opportunity and turns out it's grown exponentially in the past few years. Not years, whatever.
I think I'm a bit too early in my investing career to have that yet. Early stage investments typically mature over a 7-8 year period. I'm in year 4.
Got it.
So maybe that inflection point is about to start. But yes, there are misses. So for example, missing out on investing in a consumer company which did really well.
Which one? Okay, wait.
So yeah, I mean, I've told the founder himself. I've put it on Twitter.
Achha, yes.
So the company is Arcatron.
Arcatron. What is it?
They started off with mobility devices for disabled. So they made
Yeah.
what do you call these walking aids. They made wheelchairs. They made portable toilet seats for people who could not walk, disabled old age. But they've gradually moved on to all things mobility. So now they have heel cushions for
Heel cushions.
shoes.
Interesting.
They have
Is it like just for the
cushions
disabled or like everybody?
for everybody, right? For you
Very
and I.
interesting,
So I
very
use
interesting.
I use their heel pads insoles, right?
Very interesting.
I can't wear any other shoe.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So they've now moved on to selling seats, backrests, car
Everything
backrest,
ergonomic,
everything ergonomic, right?
Interesting.
It's a miss because we did not believe that
It will
we
pivot
could
to a certain
invest
direction.
in
Yeah.
a consumer or b if that opportunity set could convert into something else.
Very interesting.
It's a clear miss. If I would I invest in hindsight? Yes. Am I
Interesting.
willing to invest now? Maybe yes.
Why maybe?
Again, because stage, size, preference, all of that.
Very interesting. I mean, it's inherently very difficult, I guess, to predict at least consumer brands and how they will perform in India, especially if someone off the bat said we build ergonomic XYZs for people. I mean, nobody would
You
really.
tell somebody I make toilet seats
Yeah, well, people
or
wouldn't really.
porta potties effectively,
Yeah.
right? Can you prove it to them that you can sell? Let's say I think sometimes they do like a lakh worth of sales a day, maybe
Lag
more.
was
I don't know.
Oh my, that's right. That's
Can you sell
abysmally
do
high.
it by selling
Yeah,
insoles? No.
nobody will believe that.
And
Yeah.
they sell insoles for 700, 800 rupees.
Insoles for 700, 800
Sometimes
rupees.
shoes, the insoles are more expensive than the shoes.
That should be typically for India one. That's what I'm assuming.
Yep.
Yeah, and the thing with India one, if the market is captured, if people like it,
Yep.
people will just keep. And it's almost like an habit building thing, right? Like as you said, like you can't wear any other shoe.
No, I cannot. I really cannot.
It makes
My feet start hurting. I had to buy new shoes to stop, wearing those leather formal shoes.
Really, you don't like those?
I love those, but
Yeah,
I have
you can't wear
become
those.
so used to wearing it with those heel cushions
Very interesting.
that I can't.
It's fair. It's fair. All right. So we had like a tea break and we started discussing about a bunch of things. And here is like the context for it. And we'll be continuing the conversation on that. Then I discovered Peterson, and then that's where my turning point was. And then I looked at Zizek and his work. And Zizek, I mean, he seemed very smart. Have you looked at Zizek?
No, I've not, but I kind of.
He's like a communist philosopher of sorts. Have a look.
My type.
Yeah, not was that. Then I was introduced to Ben Shapiro. Then I was annoyed for a bit.
Oh boy.
Because, I mean, he knows what to say, but
He knows what to say, but the way he says it. I dislike reading almost every book, but I can get like one single statement or one paragraph of importance from almost every book. And that's the highlight. It's just the same argument between why NBA versus WNBA.
WN. I mean, not a lot of people watching it is also.
So not a lot of people watching it means not a lot of people looking at the ads on
yeah.
WNBA and transacting, right?
Yeah.
So if I pay the same amount of money for a WNBA ad and an NBA ad, what is likely to give me more return on ad spend?
Normal NBA. Yeah.
So again, similarly for somebody doing Google AdWords or something like that in India versus doing that in the US.
US will make more. Sure.
See, the pay gap is real.
Yeah.
I'm not denying that the pay gap is not real.
Considering the ratio.
In the developing world, I think quality of opportunity is something that we should aim for.
Yeah. What do you think is wrong with equality of outcome?
Outcome to be judged, you have to look at this privilege plays into that, right? To some extent.
Privilege plays. Yes. Sure. Yeah, so, see, I mean, I've heard this a lot, and every time I hear this, I ask the person, what is your definition of equity?
It's theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
It's equal opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
other things being equal.
Interesting.
You can get equal opportunity, but the other things are never equal.
Yeah, if a person starts from, let's say, 0 and the other person starts from 100, same opportunity, the person with 100 will probably do something better because he has money in the
It's
pocket.
because that in itself makes it a theoretical concept because other things are never equal.
Coming from UBI, Universal
Universal
Basic
Basic
Income.
Income.
So what I was thinking, I'll cut bits and pieces as context before we start recording, and I'll push this with the UBI question. Oh wait, we left at AI, no?
Yeah.
Oh, so
I don't even remember where
we left at AI at wait, where did we leave at AI? 1 second. We talked about the rappers, the UI thingy, and being dependent on a platform. Yeah, that's where we left.
Cool.
What we can do is we can quickly
We can
wrap up
move
AI.
on to
We can quickly wrap up AI, and then I'll put the context thing, and then we'll start. Right. So so we were on universal basic income. What do you think about that? Do you think it's feasible in India? Let's say we ignore all the current circumstances now. The world is running. Let's say tomorrow, everything is almost normal. There's no external circumstance that's. whatever, it's not bothering anybody, and we just push UBI. Do you think it'll do well in India? And if yes, why? If no, why?
My first question would be, where is that money coming from?
Interesting. Yes.
If that is coming from taxing the
The
people
taxing
who
the
are
rich.
already taxed,
Huh.
they can kind of just move out of the country, which people have been
will-
moving out of the country.
Just stop the flow of money eventually.
Right. So then again the cycle kind of again begins. Who will be taxed in order
sense.
to get the UBI? Second question is, a lot of taxes are also indirect. So am I just taxing the same people I'm giving UBI to? By spurring consumption,
Yeah.
I'm indirectly taxing them,
Yeah.
and I'm taking the same money and giving it to them. So am I really making a difference is my
Does
question.
it sound right? I don't think it sounds right economically, right?
It would be, because there are some countries in the world that have adopted it, right?
Though I guess one of the Scandinavian ones probably have.
I think Switzerland also did that
yeah,
for some time.
maybe, yes.
So I don't think it's a flawed concept,
Mhm.
but is it feasible in a country like India where you have 150 crore people? How many people do you give it to?
Yeah, maybe not. And what's the
And
amount?
we have some sort of, we had, I think, some sort of UBI.
Back when?
I think even like, let's say everybody got some COVID cash
Some
in
relief,
the
yeah,
US.
yeah, yeah.
In India, you got some free ration or
Yeah.
something like the other, right?
It
But
kind
at the end of the
induces
day,
other
you
problems,
have to
yeah.
kind of get it from somewhere.
Get it from
You
somewhere.
can't just magically create it from thin air. Is it advantageous? I think again, going back to the original conversation, who can this, like, who will benefit from this? Let's say economically backward,
India 3 perhaps.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You give them access to some capital, which they can either use for furthering education
Mm-hmm.
or some consumption or maybe entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
right? Let's say come to India too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women who go out of the workforce after either they get married
Mm-hmm.
or they have kids. Do you like, what is the provision for them to be financially independent or to pay for themselves effectively? Because what happens is, if you're not an earning member of the household, sometimes your needs are kind of neglected, right?
Yeah.
So that
Yes.
ties to financial independence, consumption, savings, all of that.
Makes sense.
So these are some segments where UBI can be of
Help
use,
change,
but then
yeah.
it's not universal anymore.
Yeah, it's very locally assigned to. I was wondering, like, just off the bat right now, something like some specific, not necessarily like real money, but some coupons which only allow to transact in terms of like whatever food or things which are actually necessary.
Food stamps, so the way food, they
Oh,
have
yeah,
food
makes sense.
stamps.
Food
in the
stamps
U-
already available.
Yep.
Makes sense. Something like that. Yeah, the problem that I usually hear, which people say about UBI, is it induces a bunch of inflation. And even you saw what happened to US. Like once they did the COVID relief, which was necessary and whatnot, but the economy just like
Yeah.
looped. So does it change the way people look at money? Because at every end of the month, you're getting X amount of money in your bank account, regardless how you perform, regardless at what time you wake up, regardless what you do in a day. So do you think that changes the way money is perceived and maybe decrease? I mean, it obviously decreases the value. And
The best example of that is the venture capital industry, where
Do
due
you
to
think-
zero interest rate,
Yeah.
we had
Huh.
technically free money, which was
sense.
put into, we had a decade plus of free money.
Mm-hmm.
We've not solved for cancer.
Mm-hmm.
We've not solved for housing. We've not solved for food security.
Mm-hmm.
We've not solved for energy.
Yeah.
But we have 100 applications where I can upload my video. I have 5 chat-based messaging systems.
Yeah.
I have 35 tools doing providing insights from a transcript
Mm-hmm.
for
Yes.
business B2B sales.
100%.
Right.
Yes.
So the same question is like, does free money, how does the perception of money change the moment it is free?
Yeah.
We've seen this example.
Yeah,
It does, right?
It
So-
does.
So there you go.
There you go. Makes sense. But okay, coming back to solving food security, energy, and in comparison to we have so many whatever unicorns in terms of whatever technology. Do you think it's more to do with the complexity of the problem, or nobody really wants to pick it up because it's complex and inherently it can't be solved?
If you remember, we discussed public versus private.
Yeah,
Um, what is the incentive for somebody is doing this in a private company?
money.
Right.
Yeah,
What is the lowest hanging fruit for me to get that money from?
lowest
By
hanging.
selling something which is either entertaining people or
Yeah,
making
yeah.
other people money.
Hmm.
Solving for food security, I would say people say I can leave it to the governments.
There's
So the question
nothing
is
in it
now:
for them. Yeah,
is there something public available for these guys to kind of bank upon or
there
do?
has to be enough. Do you think the problem is also very very complex and the logistics really don't aren't really that great? Because there are a bunch of studies that have been conducted with solving hunger problems for. From what I remember, the number was roughly $3 billion, and it'll maybe solve like almost the hunger
Oh, I've
problem.
heard a bunch of numbers, right?
Yeah, yeah,
$6 billion.
yeah. Six, three, four.
Somebody claimed, UN claimed, if
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have $6 billion, we can solve for
And
world
Musk was like,
hunger.
"Yeah, take my
And
money.
Musk said, show it to me, I will give you
Show
the
me a
money,
concrete
right?
panel." Yeah, 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 makes sense.
I mean, again, a couple of days ago, I saw a report where McKinsey had advised some company to not buy a telecom business, right?
Okay.
Because they said there will only be 1 million subscribers
Hmm.
at its peak. But US Telecom was adding 1 million subscribers a day
Interesting.
when telecom
Interesting.
really picked up, right?
Hmm.
McKinsey also said that Web3 will be worth $30 trillion by 2030 or $50 trillion. I'm not sure about the number,
Yeah.
but it
Looking
was
at
in
it now.
trillions
Yeah,
of
yeah.
dollars, right?
We don't know. Yeah.
Similarly, we have these reports saying
Yeah.
that it only takes $6 billion to solve for
So
world hunger, right?
makes sense. How
What
do we
number do you
trust? Yeah, we don't
trust?
trust. Yeah, makes sense.
That's the question, right?
Yeah, but the logistics are really complex. So
Oh
if you think
yes.
about it, because the amount of time it will take for the food to reach, the food will either decay, and I think the cost of non-decayable or slowly decayable food is way too high,
I would argue
and the
against that, right?
supplies.
Because if
Yeah,
that were the case,
mm-hmm.
we would not have ready-to-eat food or
Mm-hmm.
perishable food in our
That makes sense.
homes.
Makes sense. That's what I read though. Was really yes. So it should have been solved. There has to be something
So
that's keeping them away.
that is the
Mm-hmm.
delivery mechanism, logistics, all of supply chain is solved,
Mm.
but it is solved for when it is a for-profit.
Hmm.
But when it is public, I think there is no incentive for somebody
Makes
to
sense.
solve for it in the public infrastructure space. Maybe that's the missing piece.
Very interesting. I think only charities or like the good
Oh,
charities.
come on, we have avocados here. Some
Yeah, we
avocados
do.
are imported from
Oh
the
yeah, makes
US, or
sense. And with the
olive
amount
oil
of
is
money
imported
spent,
from,
the amount of money spent on it is also so high. And plus the cost of an avocado. It's a very interesting. Do you know the banana versus avocado argument? A lot of different people use that.
No?
It's the same. It's about like how a banana is more nutritious than an avocado, but people who have money would rather go for an avocado than a banana. It's
Yep.
very interesting, and that's specifically to do with people who have money, like India one.
Yes.
And apparently, the demand for avocados in India has like shot up for some reason. It's maybe because how rich it's depicted in pop culture.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is pop culture, it is social media, it is us wanting to emulate the West.
Hmm. Do you think what do you think about India emulating the West? Because from what I've figured, and everybody knows this for the most part, that if something works in the US, if you give it 2 years, 3 years, and try the same thing in India, it will probably work.
Mhm.
So what do you think about that? Why does that happen?
I would argue the opposite too, right?
Yeah, it's so certain.
Laundromats have not really picked up in India.
What?
Laundromats.
Okay. Yeah.
They are big in the US.
Sure.
Right? Car wash chains have not really picked up.
Yeah, because there are pre-existing like.
Yes, the
protocols that
infrastructure
people use.
in
Yeah.
India is that I don't need a laundromat because my house either has a maid
Mm-hmm.
or I have space for washing machine.
Yes.
Most of the times it's my own house or my long-term living space. I don't move every 11 months, 10 months,
Yes.
right? In case of a car wash, I have a guy who does it,
The person who does it.
right? I just
Yeah.
pay him pennies,
Yeah.
and my work is done, and the guy has work. So it's
Yeah.
again demand supply kind of solves for that. Upon your argument, we have emulated a lot of good to see, good to have, nicer things from the West. People want to study.
Yeah.
People want to have their own cars. But we forget that in the West, usually when the kids are 18, they leave the house.
Leave the house.
They
Yes.
financially, they fend for themselves to some
Yes.
extent. Maybe most of the parents pay for
Education.
some sort
or
of
whatnot, yes,
education, but
yes,
they take loans
Yes.
and they live there by themselves and they emulate that. I've not seen that play out in India yet.
Very rarely.
Right.
I think
So
barely nothing.
it's
Yeah.
we've not taken the good and the bad.
You're just
We've
taking the
taken the nicer parts which we could live with,
Hmm.
and we went with it.
Very interesting. So coming back to UBI, and this is also a common argument that I see and hear, which is it's very difficult to pick a right amount, like a month for everybody.
Yeah.
Because even if you pick a right amount, and if it's a democracy, quote unquote, which will be very difficult to handle, because in the next election they'll be like, oh, we are doubling the amount.
Yep.
The other person, oh, we are doubling the amount, and this keeps happening, and this will just screw up economics for the most part.
True.
Hyperinflation. That's that. Also, what do you think about this? And the next thing is, what is your take on universal basic necessity, which is a subset of UBI, but instead of income, there's a house, 3D printed house, some clothing, some food. Yeah.
To the first question, where will the economics play out or make sense? Firstly, how do you decide what is the right amount?
Yeah, very
Because
difficult.
if, let's say, I am living in the metro city,
Mm-hmm.
the expenses are somewhat higher because the tax is not uniform,
Yes.
right? I'm paying more tax. There is excise, octroi, I don't know what all. My even if I buy a car in Bombay, it's worth more than the car I buy somewhere in, let's say, Madhya Pradesh, Bhopal, right?
Interesting.
So how do you solve for that? One, if you can solve for that, then you can solve for that one number. But again, housing in Bombay is different. Housing in Gurgaon is different. With housing in Bangalore
Bangladesh
is different.
Yes.
So how do you solve for that? The second question is about universal basic necessity. Again, interesting, but is the question that we do not have enough housing for people,
The question.
or we don't have enough?
People are way too poor to start out. In order to even take marginal risk, you need some place to fall back to. Because if having food on the table is a question, having a roof on the
head.
top, yeah, is a question. How will you even take a marginal risk? It can be just like going out to look for a job, but the day you go look for the job, who will earn for the day? Like, how will you get food for the day? That's what happens. So for that.
I think the moment you, as a government, start offering basic necessities not out of necessity, but out of policy.
Necessity, policy. Interesting how they both are different. Interesting.
The incentives are lopsided.
Yes, sure.
So some would argue that yes, having a stable base is so important for people to be in the right mindset.
Mm-hmm.
The other people would argue that no, I would say the lack of resources kind of constraints, they breed creativity, which in turn
Push people to work harder.
entrepreneurship or something like that.
Build better. Yes.
So again, there's no right answer, right?
There's no
Both
right
are
answer.
right in their own
Sure.
on their own way. So again, the question is necessity or policy. If you do policy, then you have to do it for everybody.
For everybody. Yes.
If you do it for in terms of necessity, then we already have some of these schemes, right? We have earmarked economically backward
Yes.
classes, right? We have scheduled castes, scheduled tribes.
Like if we do it,
At
it sort of diverges to the communist idea, which ideally doesn't work out. And if we keep going closer to it in order to reach to a certain degree utopia, we might end somewhere we don't really want to end up in, which is probably a function of the complexity of how things really are and how diverse the problems we have in India. Maybe
yeah.
that. Yes, you're saying something. I probably had cut you off somewhere, but yeah.
No, I think yeah. I
That's that.
think fair point. Yeah, fair point. It's like uh, the moment. No, I was saying that we have earmarked necessities, right?
Mm-hmm.
But can we question it today? Again, can be a bit controversial. That is scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, economically backward, the right demarcation as of date for, let's say, non-metros.
Non-metros.
To some extent, yes, it does
Sure.
make
In
sense.
rural areas, sure, for sure.
In metros, does it make sense? Now, in such a diverse country, if I say tomorrow that no SC, ST, no EBC, then who?
Makes sense. Who are the people who probably need
Right.
help?
So then, do you start off again?
Yeah. What are the classes that you lay
What is your
upon
day
then?
zero?
Yeah. Makes sense.
So
Very interesting.
I think we have universal basic income necessity. All of that we already have it, and we've done that. I think 75 years ago.
Yes. Yes.
The question
Yeah.
is, are people refusing to accept that now? Because the distinction of UBI and necessity is not based on religion or casteism in the West.
Makes sense. Yes. It is not in the West. Yes, it's India. It sadly is. And it was at least earlier, and that's where the policies were built upon. And now that the economical strata has changed a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot.
But we have to remember, we
yeah.
are, even after accounting for some of the richest in the world, we are a $2,000 GDP per capita,
Which is abysmal.
which is, I think we are not even middle income.
Unfortunate.
So
Yeah.
then this, if this is the mean, the median ideally should be lower because we have long tails.
Yes. It's a shifted bell curve. Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense.
So if the median is lower, then maybe we are demarcating it in the right way.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
But we are comparing it
Yeah.
with again a
But
long
non-shifted
tail,
bell.
but,
Yeah, makes sense.
but the
Yeah.
mean is something else
higher.
for them.
Very interesting. Where do you see India in the next 5 years? What do you think will change?
Not a lot. I think
Really?
not a lot needs to change. We just need to do what we are doing well more.
Okay.
In the next 15 years, I think a
Bunch
few
will-
bits will change. In the next 50 years, a lot is going to change.
The world will be very different.
Yes. In the next 5 years, I don't think we need to change. We just need to do what we've done.
Something's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Basic things right. How do you think AI will pan out? Do you think job losses will be a real thing, considering how fast it's evolving, and should people be concerned about if they are really useful to their organization and if AI will be replacing their jobs anytime in the future?
Some jobs, yes.
What type of jobs?
Manual,
Repetitive,
repetitive.
recursive. Yes.
The moment you go from I'm doing manual repetitive work to I'm adding some value, maybe that the argument kind of shifts.
Very
But
interesting.
do you need people today to answer chatbots yourself if you can train it? No.
Not really.
So yes, those jobs are really impacted. But do you need somebody to be on the customer care for some complex problem?
Very complex problems. Yes.
For basic problems, probably not.
Yeah.
Right? AI can solve it. So yeah, I mean, it's about how much value you can add. Will the they use these words, right? The farming,
Farming.
click farms, and
Oh, click farms. Okay. Click farms are like.
so
Oh,
the click
yeah,
farm
yeah.
equivalent
Equivalent.
of sweatshops. Sorry,
Got it.
sweatshops.
Got it.
A lot of sweatshop related jobs kind of
Go ahead.
will be at risk,
Yes.
but the others will probably benefit out of AI. So we could, there are two elements to any solution, right? Either you add grow revenue, or you reduce cost. You can only reduce cost to a certain extent because your
Yes.
bare minimum is 0,
100%.
but you can
Yes.
grow your top line to wherever you want it.
For sure. 100%. Oh, we have shot, overshot, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah. So we'll finish it off in the next 3 minutes.
Cool.
Unfortunately.
Sounds good.
You know what? Some day later, maybe in a couple of months, we'll do a part 2 again.
Sounds
Continue. Okay. So we're almost at the end of the podcast, and this is a very cliche way to end it, but I usually ask this to every VC. What are the typical piece of advices that you would give to aspiring founders, aspiring entrepreneurs, aspiring investors?
It's again, I've been in this industry for 5 years, so not a lot of gyan to share, but do it for the right reasons. I think the timelines will probably be stretched a bit. You cannot
Sure.
control time, but you can control your input,
For sure.
your effort, and as in the case with everything that we do, we need to be we need to have utmost clarity. So if you are a founder, have the clarity about what kind of company you want to build. If you are an investor, have the clarity what kind of investor you want to be.
Very interesting.
Clarity of thought is of utmost importance, and being true to your own self, being self-aware, I think that helps.
Thank you, Siddharth Shah. It's been a great time.
Thank you.
I
For
hope
having
it's
me.
likewise.